All right, welcome everyone to the HVAC 2.0 show. I'm Nate Adams, CEO of HVAC 2.0, and joined by a member of the guild tonight. So we have Mr. Abhi from Canada, who is going to be emceeing this week again, and Mr. Ken Dean, wearing a interesting T-shirt tonight. Um, and we got Mr. Reedy Ward, one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet, and then Mr. Ted Kidd, who likes barking orders. And we definitely have a mix of personalities. So tonight we wanted to kind of continue. Last week we talked a lot about a number of different things that are shifting, that are going to make being in the HVAC industry significantly different moving forward than it has been in the past. So Abhi identified a bunch of things that he was really thinking about. And this week we wanted to talk some about what it might look like to change those and fix those. And this is going to be open mat. We're going to have a round robin. So without further ado, Abhi, I'm going to switch it to the next slide. And why don't you go over what you were talking about last week?
Right on, man. Thanks again for having me and letting me step up to the plate or to the mat, as it were. So if folks missed last week's show, you can go back on our YouTube and Facebook and LinkedIn and watch it again. But just really quickly, we talked about the four factors that are driving change in the industry. And I think where we landed was that yes, change is happening, but it might not necessarily be catastrophic. There might be opportunity in here for the right HVAC company, for the right HVAC technician, HVAC salesperson. The key is identifying, as Wayne Gretzky would say, a famous Canadian would say, to go where the puck is going, right? So let's just figure out where the puck is going and to aim for there. And so we said that one of the things that's happening is the nature of homeownership is changing. There are few forever homes. A lot of people are kind of in either kind of stuck in the place, not knowing when they'll leave. The number of years that someone lives in a home is kind of shrinking. So people's investment horizon is only a few years ahead. So they don't want to spend a lot of time investing in, solving problems in the home. They just want the cheapest install, quickest, put it in, get out. And that's driving change in how HVAC companies on the other end compete for that value. We also talked about consolidation, the gold rush in the industry, about horizontal consolidation being that where people are with cash are buying up HVAC companies and plumbing companies and electric companies and kind of clutching them together, running them, squeezing every last bit of efficiency out of the system by some really, and that's the third piece. I mean, here it says software services, but I think we landed on just overcomplication, using a lot of doodads to track, men and guys and how much time they're spending on the road, and trying to when you can't compete on value, the only thing you can do is either compete on price or squeeze efficiency out of the system, right? So tracking metrics and tracking how many hours and just for getting people to sell, treating service calls as a sales opportunity as well, just getting the foot in the door. And I think folks mentioned that HVAC is one of the few home trades that gets to go into people's homes multiple times a year or once every year at least. Doesn't happen with a roofer, it doesn't happen with a plumber, mercifully, and things like that. So the industry is changing to a point where people are just trying to get a foot in the door with $29 service calls and then try to sell you on things, and that's changing how business operates. And then the last thing we talked about, the great tsunami of retirement, and how a lot of people with a lot of technical expertise in this space are on their way out, and with a lot of not as many young people coming in, not just in terms of quantity, but also replacing someone with 30, 40 years of deep technical expertise is an incredible challenge for many organizations. And so from what I'm hearing is, especially with the consolidation pardon me, a lot of the salespeople in these organizations are literally used car salespeople without a lot of technical expertise, and that may lead to poor outcomes for homeowners, for HVAC company businesses, and so on and so forth. So these are like the big driving forces, and we see a kind of shift in the nature of how HVAC home residential HVAC business is done. Is that a fair summary? Did I miss anything?
I think you did great. And I mean, we bounced back and forth on the first one of the few forever homes, and you know that you can make arguments both ways to a degree there, but uh, it still just in general, I think another way to look at that would be that homes are looked at as an asset and as an investment, where I think in the past that wasn't how they were viewed at all. So that's definitely a shift. I mean, it used to be you bought a house and you just lived there. Um, Talked about that, like all the 1,000 square foot ranches for the factory workers in Detroit. If you go to Detroit, there's all of these subdivisions and entire towns that were built in the 60s that are just full of 1,000 to 1,500 square foot ranches, and they'd put an addition on the back. They'd build a big garage in the back for fixing up cars, but they fundamentally lived there their whole lives, and you used to see that a lot more. I mean, my wife's grandparents bought a house in 1974, and my sister-in-law has the house now. But I mean, they lived there for 40 something years. So they viewed the house in a different way than oftentimes happens today. So
Yeah,
that's semantics.
I was looking at some numbers for Canada. I don't know what it's like in the United States, but the fastest growing demographic as far as housing is concerned is people living with roommates in Canada. It's increased by 50%. It used to be like 10% or something, and now it's like 15% of people between the age of 15 and 45 now live with roommates. And the older people get, once they get past 55, the more likely they are to live alone because, separation happens, or, the partner passes away, and they're less reluctant or more reluctant to leave the home. And so they're kind of stuck in a home that doesn't meet their needs, right? That they are not willing to invest in because they don't have a steady income anymore because they're on retirement income. And it's just like these dynamics of home ownership are new, like very new. And it's
Agreed.
again, none of these are like, oh my God, the sky is falling down kind of stuff. It's just know that this is happening. Or just know that these are the kind of the undercurrents of what you might be seeing, and then knowing that would I mean, I think so. This week, what we want to talk about is knowing these or other things. How do you set yourself up for success? What does that look like? And a lot of the folks, all of the people on this call today, have been, in my view, anyway, looking from the outside. I would regard as kind of thought leaders in this space, like people who've spent a lot of time, not just in working with homeowners and delivering comfort problems and things like that, but also thinking a lot about the state of the industry and how to improve it, how to facilitate it. So what I thought we'd do today is to kind of do an open mat. I have a couple of questions I want to ask, and just to like try to get to what kind of a like tangible, practical, step by step advice would folks on this call give to people who are looking to go skate to where the puck is going. So that's what we're going to do today. Sound good?
That sounds great. And right before we jump to that, Jay Trammell hopped in here. He's commented, I see that routinely, seeing a house as an investment opportunity, which short term may be a good idea, but most folks that say 5 years, it's usually more like 15. So yeah, you see that, and you see people make uh, short-term decisions that turn out to be long-term ones. Um, and so it's not necessarily ideal. Like maybe you should have spent the extra $3,000.
Well, so the other thing, and I'd like maybe to address this to Reedy, is I think that people who are given options for better equipment that really have a chance to understand those options are sometimes actually getting the better equipment, even though they don't have problems that the better equipment solves, and they don't necessarily have long timelines. So Reedy, is that what you're finding the smiley faces is doing for your sales on the free quote?
Yeah, that's right. If people will just take a moment to understand what is really happening and what has happened, particularly with the use of smiley faces on the on the quote, and then understanding more along the lines of what happened in 2019 with the fur, the regulations. I think people really, if you just reason with them for a moment, they'll take and they'll begin to tell you their thoughts about comfort. And what does a smiley face mean? What does this mean to me? Well, it means you're getting something that's really, really good, versus the frowny face, meaning that you're getting something that isn't as good.
You're
Is
not
that
getting
something you want?
You're not getting a heated steering wheel with this one.
Right. Right.
And this one you're getting the heated steering wheel. This one you're not getting the heated and ventilated seats. And this one you're getting the heated and ventilated seats. It's like you can make this decision and go with the cheapest equipment here, but I would hope that you make that decision consciously rather than unconsciously.
Right.
And
Because
I'm thinking that the HVAC 2.0 report that Nate and you guys all built sounds like it might be helping. In my mind, I just want everybody to responsibly avoid responsibility.
So Ted, I'm going to pause you there for a second. So we'll come back to that. I'll tell you why. Because you're getting into like the kitchen table conversation between the homeowner and the contractor, right? That we can talk about towards the end of the show, because I think what I want to talk about now is
I'm sorry.
Contractors.
Yeah,
knowing that this is where this is going.
Okay.
Like, how can they best prepare themselves? So then we can talk about homeowners knowing that this is, what's happening. How can they prepare? And so that's at the other end. And so I want to stick with okay, cool. So let's try this. So Reedy, let me go about this in a bit of a roundabout way, and I will ask you guys for your indulgence on this. And so one way to think about this is because, like, you guys are really good mentors. You've been very good mentor for me over all these years that you've let me kind of, sneak around and listen and observe and learn from you guys. And so I can imagine. So what I want you to do is to put yourself in your natural role as a mentor. And if a group of, HVAC guys who are, let's say they're new to the industry, or maybe they have been in the industry for a while, and they just see you being successful, right? You doing really good numbers, you having good relationship with contractors, and you having a fairly decent work and life balance, and they come to you and say, "Hey, Reedy, can you like host a boot camp for us? We don't want to do what you're doing, because all this like blower door stuff sounds really complicated, but we want to be as successful as you are. We want to have I want our numbers to improve. We want a better relationship with customers. We want to, feel good about this job, because right now it doesn't. Right now it feels a little." So what would that boot camp look like, really? Like, if you could have a couple of guys who came to you and said, like, "I'm looking for some mentorship and guidance. I want to change how I'm doing like sales, like just regular sales, right? We're not even talking about the BPAT stuff, like just, APAT stuff. Like, what would like a Reedy Ward boot camp look like?"
Well, a Reedy Ward boot camp would look like me asking a question to them first. Why do you want to do this?
Okay. Do you want to role play that with me? Do you want to try that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
You be the guy.
I be the guy. Reedy, I'm looking for some help. I'm starting to feel like I'm not doing as well as I could be in this business, and I know that you sold more green speeds in this in this part of the country than anyone else, and they flew you to Vegas for that because you're successful. So how can I be better at what I'm doing?
Okay, Abhi. So let me ask you the question. Is it that you want to be better at what you're doing, or is it that you want to make more money? And are those things the same?
I figured one thing would lead to the other.
It- w- what kind of man do you want to be in HVAC? Do you want to be the guy who just goes in there and makes $2 million in sales a year? Or do you want to be the guy who makes $2 million in sales a year and then gets referrals from those because of what you've done?
Oh, man, the favorite part of my job is just like knowing I've done a good job, right? Sometimes I don't have that satisfaction. And when I try to force it, and I sometimes I spend a lot of time in people's homes, like giving them education, this and that, and they don't really want, and then it hurts my numbers. And then when I go chasing after numbers, it hurts like the relationship I have with people. And sometimes it feels like I can't have both.
Yeah, I got that. I got that. So what I would ask them then, Abhi, is I'd ask them if they'd be interested in setting down and gaining an understanding that might change the way, that might be different from the way that they've thought up to this point. And it may totally upend the way that they've thought up to this point.
And so, what would be the kind of prerequisites that you'd be expecting to see from me? Do I have to have certain, like 8 years of experience doing HVAC, or or maybe like more like an added? Is it more like an attitude thing? Is it more like tools thing?
Yeah, it would be attitude, ethics, tools don't really matter at this point. Experience doesn't matter. As a matter of fact, experience could be a detriment at this
Mm,
point. So it would really be attitude and ethics. Because if you get someone, I'll tell you why I'm saying this, and I'm
yep.
not going to be long because I know we've got other people, but there was a fellow, and I'm not going to mention his name. I'll say
Mhm.
his name is Joseph, just random Joseph.
Mhm.
So Joseph comes up to me and he says, Reedy, this happened last year. Reedy, I know you are selling stuff, and I know that if I can turn something over to you, I can make changes. So I say, Joseph, why don't you try and be a sales guy? Oh, I
Mm.
can't sell anything. I can't sell anything. I say, Joseph, what are you trying to do then? I want you to sell UV lights. I said, Joseph, why do you want to sell UV lights? Because I can make money. And that is the kind of person that Joseph and me, Joseph and HVAC 2.0, we wouldn't get along because Joseph is only about the money. He's not about the end. He's not about the people. He's not about anything other than himself. Joseph doesn't work for us anymore because the advice I gave Joseph to slow down and be honest about things, he couldn't do it.
Wow.
And so it's something that small. That's why I ask, why do you want to do this? What's the reason? You gave a perfect answer because I want for my numbers to go up, but I don't want to compromise myself. It's Jason, it's a human problem. And that's what you have to get past, that human problem of greed and lies.
Salesmanship.
Right. Right.
Yeah, but the negative form of salesmanship.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so what's it going to take to get you in this car today?
High pressure sales instead of professional sales.
Right.
Yeah,
So
consultative
let
sales.
me ask you this then, Reedy, because you said, like actually having experience might be a detriment. Why is that?
Because they think they know it all, and they're rigid
Dunning
and
Kruger.
unwilling to change. I've been in HVAC since 1998,
Mm.
and the only reason that if I can venture to say that I'm good at this is because I also have made up my mind that I can learn at any point from anyone. I have 10 children, and my children teach me stuff all the time. I didn't know what a hashtag was until my children taught me that, and
Right on.
I certainly don't know how to make a meme or what a meme is, but I know that if I wanted to, I could go to Tanner and he would tell me what to do. And
He'd make it
frankly,
for you.
yeah.
I
Frankly,
gotcha.
most people who are in HVAC they are stuck in this old rule of thumb that never worked to begin with, and they don't want to change because they're afraid.
And so part of the boot camp, like, I mean, I'm just picturing in my head, right? Like a 4-week boot camp, whatever. It's hypothetically speaking. It is. It sounds like to me what you're saying is it is important to unlearn things as much as it is to learn new things. Is that fair to say? Like
Yes.
just unlearn your practices, like your old habits of doing things.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Right on.
3 years ago,
mindset.
3 years ago, I never would have guessed. 4 years ago, and I was in home performance, so this is how crazy that stuff is. 4 years ago, I never would have guessed that a blower door has anything to do with the load calculation. 4 years ago, I never would have guessed that you could use energy to deduce what size of equipment, along with a blower door and runtime, you should put in your house. 2 years ago, I proved it. A year later, which is right now, I'm living it. And it's because I took and I learned something. I unlearned some old trash and threw it away and opened my mind up to new bountiful knowledge.
Thank you, David Sandler.
That's right.
That's true. Yeah,
That's right.
I wanted to speak up for a minute because, like on the sales front, all the training I had for years was very traditional. In fact, I did sell cars for a while, so a few used ones too. It's in between gigs, and it is really hard to unlearn a lot of that.
Yeah.
Because there's just these knee-jerk reactions, and if you reinforce them for years, undoing those is incredibly difficult. So I struggle with sticking with Sandler every day, asking questions rather than just barging forward and saying, "Oh, I gotcha. Let me put my cape on. This is what you need. I'm the hero. I'm your savior. This is going to be great." Wait a minute, it didn't work. And so it's really hard to unlearn and relearn. So in a lot of ways, it's actually better to come in green and not learn the bad habits in the first place.
So Nate, you came from, like you were saying, the sales, used car sales, and those kind of sales training and techniques, right? So would you say that's very typical of like a typical, like average archetypal HVAC salesperson? Is to like what would be things they would struggle to unlearn in a boot camp? HVAC salesperson.
Trying to act like you know more than you know. Acting with more certainty that a solution will work than you necessarily have.
Dismissing the homeowner.
Yeah, dismissing the homeowner. Yeah.
As opposed to actually listening to their concerns.
So those would be things you would learn, right? I guess they're two sides of the same coin, right? So you'd have to unlearn that you can't just like yap away one-way street at somebody and try to,
Yeah, the 30-70 rule needs to be reversed.
Can you explain what that is?
Most salespeople go and they do 70% of the talking. They'll do 95% if they could get away with it. And when you start doing consultative, that flips because you're mostly asking questions and listening. And then active listening, which means reframing the question if people give you kind of a dismissive answer at first, so that you can get into the deeper levels of the answer.
Yeah.
Sounds like you really thought about this, Ted, haven't you?
Well, I did Sandler. I've been doing Sandler since the early 90s. So yeah.
No, is that a good example of asking questions?
That was a great question.
I
didn't even see it. You're doing it to me and I didn't see it.
Just
there
like
you
that.
go.
Pointing
Well,
to
and
the blackboard.
you and Reedy a few weeks ago did a nice job of that when you and your wife got interviewed through the free quote process with Reedy. So, and Reedy went digging And so it took a longer. That was kind of the longer side of what an interview might be. And then the next week, Jeff and I worked together, and we buzzed through the same questions in 10 minutes that took like 50 the other way. So part of it is just caring too. And it can be hard when you're doing a bunch of free quotes, and particularly if you've got a large volume of quotes coming at you, which has slowed down recently. That's another one of the big recent changes is volume is falling.
Right.
But
so let me
it's too easy to rush. It just is.
So let me jump to Tanner. Then Tanner, of all the people here, I suspect you are most likely to start a boot camp or to be a good drill sergeant if Ted is not around. So what would my journey through like a Tanner's boot camp look like? So what are we doing for let's say 4 or 5 weeks? Like how would you walk me through so that I can be a better me at my job?
In terms of salesman position or actual execution or both?
Let's start with salesman. Just learning. Because the technical stuff about installing equipment and stuff. At this point, I want to be a little bit more agnostic to that because a lot of that depends on the quality of your crew and staff and the company and this and that. It's hard to navigate. But what is in your control is to just be a better technical salesperson, right? So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's kind of reiterating what's already been said, but I think the majority of it would just be shifting a mindset and getting people to where they ask questions as a first response rather than saying something.
Mhm.
Pull back on statements, a lot more questions. And to me, really, the question that I would have for someone is if I were to tell you something that ran extremely contrary to your belief, how would you take that? Would you take it dismissively, or would you want to listen and go, is this a different perspective that's been overlooked because everyone has always done it the same way forever?
That is a
And
really good question.
So I think the faster that you can get comfortable with exploring contrary beliefs within the space, I think the faster that you can adopt things. Like if it's easy for you to dismiss what everyone else is saying and go, maybe that's not 100% right. Maybe there's something else to this other thing, and your willingness to explore other things, I think's a really good starting point because it takes down a lot of those walls of, if you say you've been working in the industry for 3 years. You've been around a lot of people at this point. You've ran a lot of sales calls. You've worked for probably a couple of companies maybe, and you have a good sense of how things are actually done. And so it's real easy to begin an atmosphere and then see something that's very different come into it and immediately be defensive to it, going, well, that's different, so that can't be right. Difference gets equated to wrong because it's, hey, I've always done it this way, and this way has to be right. And so if you're able to go, okay, well, sure, everybody does it this way, but I'm here at this boot camp to get better. And so why would I expect to go to a boot camp to be better, yet do the exact same thing that everybody else around me is doing?
I mean, an easy answer to that is because people shop around to find something that just validates their beliefs, right?
Yes.
Like a lot of people, my buddies call me for advice all the time, and when I tell them something they don't want to hear, they get angry, mad at me. I'm like, dude, you called me, right? So don't get mad at me if you don't like what I have to say.
Yes.
And then when they like what I have to say, they're like, yeah, man, I knew I could count on you. You could have achieved the same result like talking to a mirror, right? So it's not.
Yeah. And I mean, that would also be a good question as well to someone like that, saying, okay, are you here for validation or are you here for different? Are you looking for a different outcome, or do you want to just feel good? Do you want to feel better about what you're currently doing?
Got it. So you're saying a lot of the focus will be on unlearning and just making sure they're in the right mindset to let go of these habits we've accumulated. It's a habit, right? Everything we do over time repeatedly becomes a habit.
Yeah.
You need to unlearn those habits, and then you have to start before you begin learning new habits.
Yeah, which I wouldn't quite say. I don't know if I would quite call it unlearning,
Mm,
because I think even if the information is wrong, let's say you've been told 2 plus 2 is 5 your whole life.
mm,
I don't think it's necessarily useful to dismiss like entirely and go, "Oh, I'm going to forget this simply because it's wrong," because knowing what doesn't work is also extremely valuable. Like you don't need to know only what works. It's good to know what doesn't work, because that's how you can avoid pitfalls. So, rather than trying to unlearn something, recognize the information that you have for what it is. Of, okay, here's the
right
way
on.
it's always done. Well, guess what? If I thoroughly understand this, I understand what that process looks like, understand the typical outcomes, and then I can understand why those outcomes tend to be related to that same process. What's
Mhm.
happening that's causing the same thing. So then when you do something different and you run into a problem, or say you did something a little wrong, it's a lot easier for you to troubleshoot that. To go, oh, here's what I did, and this is real similar to what I did at this point, and because this is what typically happens. And so it's just really utilizing the knowledge base that you have to the fullest, of really, unlocking that ability to see things from as many perspectives as possible.
Awesome. And so what would, like, let's say a 4-week boot camp, like week to week, look like? Like, are we like, do we go on ride-alongs, or are we watching some videos, or?
um, that's a good question. That's a hard question. Um, I mean, a lot of it, I don't think a lot of it is necessarily complex. I
Mm,
think it's fairly simple. It's just not easy to do. And so it's going to be doing a lot of the same things just over and over and over. So it's going to be, okay, we're going to listen to, read, uh, watch videos of Sandler. Like, we're going to begin to internalize the ability to ask questions as just a knee jerk reaction. Like, everything we do is a question. Reverse things, learn to actually listen, and learn to not look down on people that you're asking questions to. And
mm,
so it might be like week one, maybe we just kind of just briefly go, hey, this is what this looks like. Here are the things that we're going to do in the preceding weeks. And then the last 3 weeks is just basically, okay, we're going to go start doing it now. And we're going to do it, and we're just going to rinse and repeat everything. We're going to run through a scenario. We're going to go do this sales call, and then we're going to debrief and go, here's what we did good, here's what we did bad. And, just do it as many reps as possible. Because and it's a analogy that I use a bit that goes back to jujitsu. Is people like to um, describe the amount of time they've been training in years.
mm,
But here's the thing, there's a big difference in me as a hobbyist who's been training 8-ish years to somebody who trains every single day for 3 years.
right.
If it's not the amount of time that you've been actively doing a thing, it's how many mat hours do you have? How many sales calls have you ran? Like, how many hours have you spent in front of a customer asking questions? Or how many hours have you spent listening to Sandler, or thinking about how to do this thing, running through scenarios in your mind, even something as simple as that, just trying to maximize your time of getting as many reps in as many different ways as possible. So that way you can really build that muscle memory and get that, intuitive question asking down pat as quickly as possible.
Man, that makes sense. So what you're saying, at least what I'm hearing, is that, like, so first we'll just like observe for a week. You'll just observe someone else doing, because a lot of like what you do, it's like it's tacit knowledge, right? It's like
Hmm.
trying to explain to somebody how to ride a bike. Like, you can't really write down a set of
Yeah.
instructions. You kind of have to, they have to watch, and then they have to get on the bike and try it, and then they have to do it often enough that, like, something clicks, I guess, or just something happens. You build the muscle memory, and then you know how to. And so, like, and you need to do it over a period of time, and you need someone out there, not just the training wheels aspect, but just to, like, kind of help you navigate. And
Yeah, you need somebody with an outside perspective of, if you're in the middle of it, you're not going to see things as clearly as somebody who is outside of that and watching you. Because you really, it just comes down to, what is your feedback loop? Like, when
Mhm.
you do a thing, how well can you troubleshoot every little thing you did wrong? And then how can you take that, putting in to your process, and then rinse and repeat again, of just where it's just constant refinement, constant improvement, just how do you shorten that and do it as many times as possible?
Yeah, man. Actually, so that leads me to ask, like we're talking about archetype, right? Like this is like an average HVAC salesperson. I mean, we're not. It's hard to condense an entire industry down to one person, but you know what I mean. Like an average sales, like a regular sales, like how much time do you think they spend on like just reflecting on like their calls, like this, like feedback loop you're talking about, right? Like self improvement. Like, does that happen often? Is that a part of the standard practice? Do you think?
So I think it falls within two camps. The most common camp is just no.
Mm,
Everything is just shooting from the hip. And then the other is they will have a process of some type. It's usually more traditional sales, high pressure sales, and they might, but I feel like that's more of just, they tend to have like a script, and it's like, we're going to follow the script to a T, and we're going to learn all these objections, and here's how you manipulate the customer into buying what you want. And so it's this strange feedback loop to where I kind of question whether or not how effective something is of just, because then it's more of personality type. If somebody's has a lot of charisma and they can convince somebody to do stuff, well, sure, that guy's going to be good, but I'm not sure if that's something that can be really replicated and utilized, not without just finding that character type multiple times.
So what you're saying is they just practice. If they do, they practice like getting close and close to like perfection with that script, rather than try to think about the ways in which they can improve, like improv, basically, right? It's
Yes.
actually almost like two different ways of looking at this. One is like sticking tight to a script. Otherwise, like improving so that you're learning more about the other person, and it's more of a back and forth dialogue.
Yeah, I think it's more of what's the goal. So like the traditional salesman that we're calling, that's someone like his goal is how do I get people to buy as much as possible? To where I feel like our goal is, okay, how do we provide the best service to this customer? And to do that, it's how do I understand what it is they want and how do I translate information to them as efficiently as possible? So the goals are different. And since the goals are different, you're going to have to approach it differently. And that's where that that feedback loop is going to be different because I'm interested in when I ask a question, what kind of answer do they give me? You know, when they tell me a thing, what do I miss and what do I get? When do I reverse when I need to reverse to understand things better? How do I get in their mind as best I can so that way I can go, oh, okay, it sounds like you have problems X, Y, and Z. Does that sound correct? Yeah, it is. Okay, well, what about this? Is this, you're driving the conversation into the actual pain points, into the things they actually care about, because that's what you're doing. You're trying to find out what is it that you want from me?
Hmm.
How do I serve you best? Versus versus trying to steer a conversation into leading to an outcome that you want of going, oh, I want to sell this unit with a UV light and this and this and this. So it's
Blinky, blinky.
totally different. Yeah.
So
Um,
Nate, can you pull up that comment from Total Tech that says you're overthinking your calls?
there you go,
So
buddy.
what would you say about this, Taryn? Because I hear this a lot, right? Like we have a script. I mean, I don't. So Total
Yeah.
Tech, I'm sorry if I'm not understanding what you're saying properly, but what I'm hearing similar to this out there is it's not that complicated. We already have a script. Let's figure that out.
Yeah. Well, I I think what he's probably coming to is, oh, well, there should be a super simple script because residential is super simple and
Mm.
everyone should be able to just follow this. I don't think that's the best way of going about that. I think, okay, let's see. Okay. I think that's conflating personal advertising versus true sales because that's you shouldn't go to someone's house to basically be like, "Hey, here's why I'm amazing and here's why you should be buying like 30 seconds ago." I, that doesn't really do very good. I don't know how everybody else would take that, but I would tell somebody to leave immediately. Um, it's
So
not. Go ahead.
go ahead, Tanner.
I was just going to say that calling it overthinking, it's real similar in when people talk about the term soft skills. I
Mm.
heard a guy, Alex Hormozy, he made a good point that there's two things that people call hard skills and soft skills. And he says soft skills are really just things that people don't understand how to nail down, because it's like this general term of, it's like, what is a soft skill? We really don't know. And in reality, all a soft skill is something that you can't go, here's exactly what it is and here's exactly how you do it. And I feel like it falls into the same thing of, oh, well, it's overcomplicated. Why? Because we don't really understand what's going on here. Like, it's not really that complicated. Like, it's actually really simple. It's as simple as this. Go and ask questions and find out what it is they want and need. What are they asking from you? And so something as simple as that, the difficulty is that it might be simple, but it's not easy. And so in order to make something seem easy, you just got to get really good at it. And so it's not overcomplicating it. It's just you're building in just intuitive question asking that's in the moment, so you can spend all your brain power is focused on the homeowner themselves, not all these other little things of trying to memorize words, memorize your SOPs, and memorize how to do this and this and that.
We have people that answer the phone 24 hours a day, so that you're never cold. Somebody will come out and fix your equipment.
Right.
Yes.
So there's two things happening here, right? And I want to see if I can connect like the dots between what Total Tech is saying and what we have been saying. And so you guys tell me if I'm wrong. So one, I think there is some value in what Total Tech is saying, in that like you need to have some mental clarity on why you exist and what services you offer, right? So that people know, like and just have like a very clear, like, like value proposition. Like, we've been in business for 60 years. We've been in thousands of homes. We know how to fix stuff. Okay, that's clear. I mean, that's great, right? Like, just having that clarity of who you are as a business, and try to attempt to differentiate yourself from like 800 other HVAC techs. Like, that is valuable from a marketing and just from a clarity perspective.
Well, so from Sandler perspective,
hold on, Ted. Hold on.
I think you might be going the wrong direction.
No. Hold on. Let me finish. And you tell me if I'm wrong, but let me
Shush.
finish. So there's value in just having some internal clarity on like what your company is, and just having a couple of statements, blah, 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 right? From a marketing branding perspective. But like, you can't take that statement and then just like dump it in every home you go to, because you don't know. Because in the assumption that I think that some people are making is that people just want us to simply understand what you offer. And I think that assumption just locks you into a very narrow piece. So now you're just like, like rolling the dice and hoping that what you offer matches what people want, whereas a different approach, which is what you folks are saying, is that rather than like, shoot the crap and hoping this value match happens, you can actually engage in a value discovery process. Try to understand what the homeowner values, try to see if there's something you can offer. And then if those two things meet and there's enough budget, then you can do the sale, right? It's fairly straightforward. It's not any more complicated than that to me. It seems like it might seem complicated because you don't have a process, and it might feel daunting if you're trying to do this every single time. But if you had a process that treated this conversation as a value discovery, then you are finding out actually if you're a match or not with this homeowner. What do you think, Ted?
And what their solution might look like. I view this as guided choose your own adventure. So we can do this or we can do this. Which one would you like to do? A couple different paths at the beginning, and then you ask some questions, and then you offer some different options that kind of go down paths that they were suggesting. So value discovery process is definitely a good way to put that. But fundamentally, it's just trying to find the best solution for every client, whatever that looks like. It might be a crummy single stage install. That might be absolute top of the line. It might be somewhere in between. What 2.0 is uniquely capable of is it can do full on home performance work as well if needed, but that's probably not going to happen very much. For the most part, it's just going to be HVAC. But it's interesting because the other piece is like, I worked at a dealership for a while, and it's like, so why buy from us? And I always just found that to be BS, and I don't mean
it sounds so ungenuine, because there is nothing different about your company. You're the same.
Yep.
And the homeowner knows it. And so
Yeah.
when you waste their time with that horse shit, you're actually losing credibility as opposed to building. You have this small window of opportunity to build your value, and you shouldn't be talking about this company that stands behind you. You should be talking about the homeowner.
And it's not just about building your own value too, Ted, right? Because it's also about discovering value. Because like until you're asked, like homeowners might not even realize that there are problems in the home that they want to solve with the HVAC. And so it's that like value discovery process, like opening up the pie.
It's asking the questions that causes the homeowner to slow down. And by causing the homeowner to slow down and think things through, they start to appreciate your process. They're like, oh, wow, this feels very different. All the other guys came in, went in the basement, measured something up, and then gave me a quote. They didn't ask me anything. They just handed me the quote. Like,
no value discovery.
There's nothing. You know, and frankly, it's you know, I didn't realize it was this bad until Jeff went and worked for suspiciously gay duo over there. And he started feeding me back, you know, stories of some of these leads, and he'd ask these people, he'd go into the house and he'd ask people a couple of questions, and the homeowners, a lot of times they were completely floored. Why weren't the other guys asking me these questions?
Yeah.
So the thing is,
I
think what you'll, oh, sorry, go ahead, Reedy.
It comes down to something you said earlier, Abhi. You said to see if they're a match for you, or you're a match for them. I can't remember the exact words that you said, but the word match is everything in there, because what Ted just said is what the industry-wide process is. Everything we do is a match for you, whether it's the crummy or the very best, and we're going to tell you why. Mm-hmm. So it really comes down to it. And what Total Tech said earlier on, all they care about is hot and cold air coming out of the vents. Well, that's true in a lot of cases, but when you take a minute to dig and find out, it's when you can truly be a match.
And our process does that. What Reedy's, yes, our process does that digging so that you can document that homeowner did indeed only care about what was blowing out of the vents. So that, because one of the problems that occurs is if you go in and you approach everyone like they're just digging out of the vents, you're gonna have some problems after the install, and the homeowner gets to make up their own narrative about what work you didn't do. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you've documented the fact that you asked these questions and they were dismissive, you can go back, and most of these guys have used this to their advantage. You can go back to your documentation and say, oh, well, so when I was here before, this was what the conversation was. And one of the things that we offered was a comfort consult, which is a load calc and a blower door test. And you said you were fine with like for like, or whatever happened. Or you said that you didn't want to do the static pressure test. And so now we're having some static issues. And we told you that if your ductwork didn't match your equipment, that you might need to spend some money on your ductwork. And now that's where we find ourselves. So all of this is about really positioning the contractor so that it doesn't end up being the customer's narrative later.
Because it will be.
Yeah, it's getting in front of the narrative and making sure that you're in control, but you're also offering the clients, genuine questions and really trying to figure it out. There's a couple of good comments over, Abhi. Do you want to touch on any of them?
Yeah, sure.
Ted pulled this one up already.
So this sort of felt like it was falling right into place with, you know, if the homeowner's stuck on the numbers, but you followed the questionnaire and documented their answers, you can sell them whatever they want to specify to you.
Yeah, if they do single stage and then the single stage ends up not being satisfying later, you've got documentation to point back at, which is nice. And I mean, Tim Nahr just did that. What was it, a month ago or something like that? Installed a system last year, advised them that they may want something better than single stage. They declined it, installed the single stage, found out that it wasn't what they wanted, and they just bought a brand new system from him again that they paid for. Normally, that would have been a huge number of callbacks and fights and just basically seeing which side's going to wear down first. But I mean, what are you going to do with single stage? You can adjust your charge and your airflow. That's what you got. Or, you know, your gas pressure. You know, there's not a whole lot you can play with on those. So I thought that one was interesting. And then also Ken chiming in here, servicing the needs of the customer as opposed to seeing the customer as a source of income. It's a different way to get there. And servicing the needs of the customer done well leads to the income.
But it comes from knowing your place, of knowing that you're not the decision maker. The customer is. It's their money. They're the ones spending it. So you don't go in trying to convince them of something that they need. You find out what it is they need, and then you let them buy whatever it is that they're wanting to buy.
You know, actually, I'm going off script here. Not that we have a script, right? But off of what I thought we were going to talk about today. I want to try this analogy out on you guys, and then I want to ask Jeff a question. One thing I was thinking today was like, I think maybe a lot of HVAC technicians, sales technicians probably see themselves as closer to being like architects, right? Like, so you draw blueprints to help people, like, you know, I want to move to a new place. And then they'll be like, okay, I'll draw the schematic for you. I'll draw you this house and like this thing and this thing. And this to like, because I think they're technically minded and they want to be like, you know, technically proficient and to show off their technical skills and put them in practice. And I wonder if it might be more useful to think of your job of sales as being close to a realtor, right? To helping people find the homes they need rather than like selling them a product or selling them a blueprint. Like, does that make sense? Does this analogy make any sense?
That's a wonderful analogy. I like it.
Yeah, I was thinking because I was earlier today on LinkedIn, someone was asking about like, is like HVAC design any value to people? And I think like fewer people want to look at blueprints and stuff. Most people want someone to just walk them through, hey, this house, what do you need in a house? This will be good for you because you said you're growing your family in the next few years. And so like, I'll show you some houses that have more than 3 bedrooms. Yeah, I'll show you houses that are closer to a school district. Like that's what you want, right? Out of a realtor, like someone, not more than a blueprint of a new house. And I wonder if that analogy makes sense to you.
This checks all the boxes. This checks 8 of the boxes. This checks 6 of it's the smiley faces. Only for houses.
And so you make the choice because it's your home and you live here for as long as you choose to. I'm just here to unlock doors and like walk you through things and help you find like value discovery, right? Whether
Being
this
the
is a
guide,
good match
not
for
the
you.
hero.
Yeah. But Abhi, what strikes me there is you're talking about something that's boiled down. I don't want to become an expert in something just because I'm buying it one time. So, I mean, there's some things I do that I enjoy that, but there's some things where like, well, in building the rig that we're out here with right now, my buddy Mike Platko, who works with Tim Portman, one of my favorite HVAC contractors. I asked Mike about some various things, and he said, "Just get this," and I was like, "Okay," and I just went and bought it. I know you did the research, so that's fine. So I think a lot of what we want is just to have things boiled down in an understandable way, so that we can make the call, and we get the opposite of what I've experienced for years, which is like, "So what's home performance?" And then like 5 minutes later, and their eyes are totally glazed
5
over.
minutes,
They're
20
wandering away.
seconds.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, a few seconds later, yeah. But I mean, like you just lose them; they're gone. Because it doesn't connect to anything that they necessarily care about.
Okay,
So
actually, let's chase this analogy down, right? And then use it or spit it out. Okay, so you want to buy a new house. You call a realtor. Like, let's imagine what a realtor acting like an HVAC, like a typical HVAC salesperson. How would the realtor act? He'd
Oh, you
come
didn't
in.
need that house. You don't need to spend that kind of money.
Ted, you totally nailed it. Do you remember that monastery that I worked on years ago? There was
Yes.
a Pittsburgh HVAC contractor who came in. This is what you want, and I'm like, he did a single stage heat pump for this place. It was just for the church side of things, and it was mainly for air conditioning, but also for heat. They didn't have gas, and I was like, well, I'd at least like to do a 2-stage, or maybe a variable. He's like, I already bought it. This is what they need. And the dummy didn't hook up to frost. So I get a picture from one of the monks. So oddly enough, I have a few monks that are friends, and the outdoor unit is literally
Nice
a block
cube.
of ice. Yeah, it was just a block of ice. So, and it's a great picture to have. I'm thankful to have the photo because I can use it as this is what happens when things get messed up, or this is what happens if you don't defrost the outdoor unit. But yeah, he took over and said, no, this is what you need. So yeah, I'd be like, so I'm thinking about 3 bedroom.
That guy was
No, you don't
really
need that.
lucky that they were willing to use fans to connect the sanctuary to the rest of the house, because 3 tons was grossly oversized for that sanctuary.
Yep. But it was actually about right for the 6,000 square feet of building. So it kept it dry. It didn't make it crazy cold, but it actually kept it really dry. And this is Eastern Orthodox. So they wear heavy cassocks all the time. And he told me, he's like, Nate, 70 degrees and like 70% humidity is miserable. 70 degrees and 40% humidity is amazing. And that was because they just ended up connecting the whole building through. But yeah, that guy was like, no, this is what you need. And I certainly have heard a lot of stories, particularly of older school companies, just making that decision for people.
Those guys
Ted,
gave me the experience of something was going on in Ukraine that we weren't getting the honest story about. And I can't remember what they were telling us, but they were Ukrainian monks. And they're like saying, oh yeah, whatever the media is telling you is total horse crap.
Ted, do you want to do a quick role playing with me?
Okay.
So I'll be someone who wants to buy a new house. You be a realtor who would act like a typical HVAC salesperson would. Okay.
Okay.
Yep. So, oh hey, Ted, my family and I are thinking of buying a new place, and someone said we should talk to you.
That's great. I have a perfect house for you in mind.
Oh, but I, but you didn't even ask. Well, hold on, you didn't even ask me what I want. It's just my wife and I, and we have
The
a cat.
reason I'm telling you that this is the perfect house is because it's going to be gone very quickly, and so you need to act fast.
Okay, well, I don't,
When would you like to see it?
I don't know if
Why don't we go right now?
I don't know what
It's
my
going to be a
budget.
better deal if we go right now.
I have a very tight budget, though.
You
and
sound like you're hesitant, Abhi. Why are you hesitant?
I don't know, man. I'm feeling a little intimidated right now, if I'm being honest.
No. That's okay. Let's go check out the house and you'll feel a lot better.
Sell me this pen.
Sell me this pen. There's a couple of good comments that just came through here too. It's an emergency if you don't buy this pen.
The rest of you guys are in trouble because you're not topping that one tonight.
Total Tech Fix is a really key point that, I mean, we talk about a lot.
Yeah.
Most of the equipment that's out there in the residential market was installed in an emergency. Yep. Somewhere between 80 and 90%. So there's no exact numbers out there, but from internal meetings, I've heard numbers of 80 to 90%. So this fact can't be overlooked when having these types of discussions. Yes. And so that's part of why what Abhi was just kind of poking at, that you don't want the full education, but it is good to at least help people understand that there's differences. I mean, like we've joked in the past, when I first started learning the home performance side of things and the HVAC side of things, I didn't really understand what the difference was between a furnace and a boiler. And those are very different pieces of equipment.
So to tie this to what the little role-playing thing we did now, and the reason why Ted the HVAC realtor is the way he is because usually when people come to him, they're like, hey, Ted, my house burned down.
Right.
I want a new house.
Yeah.
And then you're like, okay, I got a perfect house for you. You better sign now or you'll lose it. And then that's how they get pressured into that sale.
Yeah.
It's because 85 to 90% of the time,
the interesting thing is these guys using the comfort quiz have had homeowners sit for as much as a week waiting for a comfort consult using space heaters. Like, the homeowners sometimes put the brakes on the process and live through periods of pretty significant discomfort when they realize that this decision can be made wrong and that it might be catastrophically wrong if they have significant pre-existing comfort issues. I don't know if Reedy or Tanner or Ken have a story they want to tell that backs that up.
I've got a lady that she called me out there. She has, it's been some time ago that I first went out there, and I told her, let's wait. Why don't you just wait? She had 3 systems. Our company put those 3 systems in probably 15, 16 years ago, something like that. And this is a new owner. The old owner, we told them, you need to do something about this because there's so much oversizing going on here. And that was even before we had really done anything with the blower door or anything like that. It's just obvious because the humidity wasn't under control and it short cycled. And they wouldn't do anything. They wanted it their way. That's the way we left it. That's fine. The new owner buys it. She comes in. She goes, I want to make certain that we do this and we do it right. She said, I bought this home for my son. I'm redoing it for him. He lives here. He's willing to do things right. We didn't even go do the comfort consult for 3 months. It was in the summer. And so she asked us, is there anything you can do to kind of help things? Well, what we ended up doing was turning off some of the air in the basement to move it upstairs because nobody really lived in the basement. And then when they moved downstairs, we ended up doing the opposite, putting it back down in the basement. Finally, we got there to do the comfort consult. She's got 12 tons in that house. The house was 4,000 square feet. And what we ended up doing, we did the comfort consult. We initially gave her the offer to put 4 tons to cover the whole place. She said, no way, I'm not doing it. I can't do it. I don't believe that'll work. That's fine. So what we did is we put the 4 ton in. We asked her what she wanted us to do in the basement. And she wanted us to put a dehumidifier in there, encapsulate the crawl space, and a small mini split. That's what we did. We started that project all the way back. We didn't even start that project until, geez, I think it was April, and we're not finished with it yet. And the only reason I'm telling this story is because not only did she spend $125,000 on that project, but it's still not done. And she waited and has waited because she wanted to know that what she was going to get in the end was wonderful. And it's going to be that way. And it's because of a process, not rushing.
And a process through which she discovered the value of investing so much in her house.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Even though there was structural work that had to be done, we had nothing to do with that. A contractor came in and told her after we've started the project, she signed the deal. She gave us $58,000 down. After all of that, the contractor said, "No, you shouldn't do that. You should just get a single stage piece of equipment." And the contractor is now.
Did she fire the contractor? Because she's probably pretty educated by that point.
She got rid of that contractor. Another contractor came in and told her, "You probably shouldn't have got all this." So she's ran out of contractors. She can't fire them anymore. But what she told them to do is, don't talk to me about the HVAC, the insulation in the attic, the air sealing in the attic, or the crawl space. You follow along with what this guy needs in HVAC. Down in Pinehurst, North Carolina, of all places, there are not contractors who are willing in all these custom multi-million-dollar homes that are not willing to be custom. They just want to do what they want
crappy
to do.
Work. Right. They want to do the crappiest work they could get away with.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow. Yeah, million-dollar homes, multi-million-dollar homes either have hands down the best HVAC you've ever seen in a very small percentage of cases, or hands down the worst HVAC you've ever seen. Ductopuses and like a horribly oversized dumping system.
Why is that?
Because they want it done quick. Either they want it done
quick, or it's the last thing they were thinking about.
Yeah.
Because they haven't really lived in an uncomfortable house, or it's the first thing they were thinking about because they have lived in an uncomfortable house.
Talk about
a new house. They expect it to be good.
Yeah.
I mean, well, it's new. It should be good, right?
Yeah. Well, I think it's really more, from what I've seen, is where is the value of the money being spent? You know, do you want to have a good HVAC system, or would you like to have it to be a little bit bigger, a little bit nicer with granite countertops?
Right.
You know, they're like, oh, well, just give me the cheapest HVAC. Let me get the pretty countertops.
Because people don't understand the value of.
Yes. They don't until it's a problem. And then it's like, oh, wow, maybe I should have thought about this ahead of time. Like maybe 5% of this build budget wasn't enough to actually install, a proper HVAC. Because I mean, the new construction side of things, and everybody that's ever been anywhere around it, if you've drove by and just smelled the same air, you know that it is just piss poor quality. You're trying to find the cheapest people who is like, oh, will you install everything for less than 10,000? Like we want a 5-ton unit, full duct work, layout, everything, but 10,000 is our budget. And there's people that get those jobs, and so you can only imagine what you're going to get when you're dealing with just such slim margins.
Mm-hmm. Reedy, you were about to say something earlier, and we all interrupted you.
I was about to say what we ended up doing to give that lady throughout the summer, because she didn't have any insulation in her attic in the summer because we pulled it all out, and we had all those 12 tons she had. We left one of them running. It ended up being 4 tons. We disconnected some of the duct and put it down in the basement and let it free flow down in the basement. But the rooms there was one room that was still kind of hot. And so what we did is we ended up going in there and we put one of those portable air conditioners in there. And what do you know? So it worked fine. Now we've got the thing up and running. It's a green speed. It's a 4-ton. and it's over an encapsulated crawl space. The insulation still isn't in the attic, and most of the time that thing is running in the 70% range. So 4 tons, she didn't have any energy. We couldn't take her energy use to deal with it, and the other people died. So probably a 3-ton would have worked. But the reality of the situation is it took someone digging and looking and being able to honestly go in there and say they don't care about just the cold and hot air. They care about something more. And that's what got us that job.
Yeah.
That's all I want to say.
This is a good question because a lot of them don't, but once they do, they're forever.
What's the question, Ted?
How many homeowners know what a really comfortable, healthy home feels like?
And
I didn't.
Me neither.
So it was the first electrification, Ted, that we did the way that we wanted to do. John Nigro's house, pulled out an 80K furnace, put in a 3-ton heat pump, a green speed. And I remember before we got the house insulated even, I walked in there and I'm like, this is by far the most comfortable building I have been in my entire life, by like an order of magnitude. It's my buddy Cameron Taylor, who runs a bunch of really cool buildings at University of Texas Arlington. He visited one of the other ones and said that this house had womb-like comfort. So we didn't even have that house set very high. I think it was set at like 58 or 60, and it was around freezing outside when he visited. But he walks in and he's like, where do I put my coat? Because the temperature inside was just so even. So like part of what made me a believer was walking into John's house and being like, holy crap, what happened? Like this place is incredible. And then you get to experience it other times. Like I'm thankful that finally I've been able to buy my own HVAC instead of just selling and installing it for other people. But like our Airbnbs in West Virginia, they have a little 1.5 ton Daikin fits because they're pretty stinking close to right sized. Those houses are very even in their temperatures, and like the walls and the surfaces are all pretty good. And that's even for the little house, the Wizard house. It's 672 square feet, and I kept the existing duct system. So just 6 inch runs. That's all it was. And my wife was like, this is the most comfortable home I've ever been in. But until you experience it, you're not there. And I ran a 2-stage at our house and I regret it. I ran a Bosch, which functions as a 2-stage. And I regret that decision. I wanted to try it to see if it was good enough for me to talk to other clients about. And I came to the conclusion that no, not really. Like, or if I do, I'm not going to promise them full on comfort. It's pretty good, but it's not what I had hoped. So it's not a decision I would repeat. But anyway, yeah, most homeowners don't know because frankly, most professionals don't know.
Right. Can you pull up Ben Reed's comment?
Yes.
I think this goes back to what you were saying, Tanner, is and connecting back with our conversation so far is that it's not it. So you're not just competing with other HVAC guys to do people's heating and cooling, right? You're also like competing in a way for people's budgets and attention and resource, like just mental bandwidth with their countertops, with their kitchen. So like there's a dozen HGTV shows, like $1 trillion, cultural economy of like home renos, like, oh, countertops this and like backsplash that and this and that. And so that's where people's minds and hearts are at, which is why we think when we go in as HVAC, people only care about heating and cooling, but what people want is to get more value out of their home in a bunch of different ways, right? By being comfortable, like resale value, aesthetics, something they can brag about with their friends. And those value is not being captured in the way that traditional HVAC does business.
Well, Ben's second comment was just that, seriously, until air quality and thermal comfort carries more social currency, the granite countertops and stupid lawns will always remain top of wallet. I like that phrase, Ben. That's a good phrase.
And in our mind, I think it's important to to punctuate right here, the things that they're valuing at the moment that you're there with them are their right to value.
Yeah.
So all we really need to do is make sure that we advocate for the things that we understand value to people. And if they disregard our advocation for these values that are within our frame of reference, then they're taking responsibility for it.
Yeah.
They're basically saying to us that I got other things that are more important to me right now, and that's okay. What's not okay is not taking that effort to advocate, and thereby not shifting responsibility for the decision from yourself to the homeowner. I don't know if I've articulated that clearly.
Makes
Nope,
sense.
I think you got that. You want to offer education a couple of times and hopefully document it so that if they make the bad decision, they own that bad decision. Like Tim's client that replaced their equipment a year later. So it took me a second to figure out TG. This is T. Gronis, who has been through the mill just horribly on this point. So
we should
T and I have been friends. What's that?
I was saying we should have TG on the show and just the whole episode talk about his horror.
Yeah, we should 100% do that.
Oh, yeah.
Here's the short version.
If you want to, if you're interested in doing that, give us a thumbs up.
I have
I'll talk to him too. I bet he'd be game. But the short story for T was they built a new home in Georgia, and they did a single stage zone system really, really badly. And his wife is environmentally sensitive, and so she started getting sick in the home. Because it wasn't controlling the moisture and the humidity inside. And so they ripped it out of a brand new house. 18 months later, they ripped the entire system out and completely reinstalled a brand new system, new ductwork, fully modulating, added a dehumidifier, outdoor air, like the works. They put a really nice system in. And he commented, how much more comfortable that house was after installing the right system. So it's good that he asked that question, like how many homeowners know that, and not many do. And there we are. Sure, we can do that. So, T, I don't know if you have a mic yet, but we'll get you sorted here.
I had a question for Jeff and Ken. Right. So going back to what we were talking about in terms of boot camps and learning new things and getting into that mindset and trying a new approach to doing it, right? So you go to a boot camp, you have all this new wisdom, new ways of doing, and some practice with doing it, and you've kind of flexed your muscle and you've done a couple of reps. Mm-hmm. Then you go back home to your own company. What happens then? Like, how do you keep up with this practice? How do you like blend this into your business practice? Like, how do you change like your operating process, right? Can you, Ken and Jeff, like walk me through what that would look like? Just like using your own, as a kind of like an archetype.
Yeah, it's a mindset shift, because to begin with, the only thing you have to offer the customer is, apart from your own reputation, and of course you firmly believe that you do the best job, all that you've got to offer them is SEER, or energy efficiency ratings, which is a terrible thing to try to differentiate on. And you can call yourself a comfort advisor. Everybody does. And that drives me nuts, because they know nothing about what comfort is. Comfort is usually not high efficiency equipment, because it's so often installed incorrectly. And comfort is not a temperature. There are so many things involved in comfort conditions: temperature, noise, wind, moving air. Yes, thank you, Ben. Humidity, cleanliness. You don't even want to know. One of the best compliments that was ever paid to me was somebody said, "I don't even think about my HVAC system anymore." She said, "I had to go to the thermostat anytime I went to another room because I had to reset the temperature." She said, "We don't even think about it anymore. It just feels right." So there's comfort. And so many of the people in the company, technicians in particular, are interested in fixing things. They want to replace a part. They want to change a setting. And we have to understand and help them appreciate that. Not that, but we have to help them appreciate all the things that go into making it comfortable. So design, delivery, accompanied by correct installation and setup. So it starts all the way back. It's not just going in and replacing a part.
Right. So you're almost kind of have to like retrain your not by retrain. I don't mean like technical training, but to just like almost like refocus.
Mindset shift. Yeah. Paradigm shift.
So where do you go to do that? Because it takes time away from like the stuff they have to do day to day to keep the calls coming in, right? Like, so where do you go for like help and support to be able to do that thing? Like, how do you even make that happen? Like, you know what I mean? Like, you walk me through that?
I do it by going out in the field with the guys and walking through. Sometimes I'll be there at the start of the job. And for those who are listening, my son is my business partner. So some jobs were his, some jobs were mine, but going out and of course, the installers know essentially what needs to be done, helping them appreciate things like turning vanes, low static pressure fittings, and just standing there with them at the beginning of a job and helping them envision yes, we can do it this way. And entertaining ideas. So letting them be part of the team. But in one case, talking with them about total equivalent length. So we've got a plenum and a takeoff and a trunk and a fitting and a branch run and another fitting. And until they've been exposed to it, they have no idea that you can have a 300-foot total equivalent length run when it looks like it's only 40 feet from the furnace.
Yeah.
Sounds like it's a lot of heavy. Sounds like it's a lot of heavy lifting from you, Ken. Then you have to invest the time and effort, and maybe not everyone would like that or receive it well. How do you? Is that right?
Yeah. Well, fortunately, I was in the position of being the leader. So yeah, if you're not the leader, it can be really tough to get new ideas adopted.
So Jeff, are you on call? Are you able to join in?
Yeah, I'm here.
So what would that look like, Jeff, if you're not, as Ken say, like the owner or leader of a company, you've learned this new process and you're taking it back to your company, right? Like what would it take for you? Like how do you integrate like a new process into like whatever systems and processes that your company already has going on and make that work for you?
Well, I think it's all about molding things around what you have and how it works for you. It's not always going to be, as we've discussed throughout this, just running off of a straight script. So I do think there has to be some moldability that you have within your organization to adopt things. And then the best way to continue that is to have some sort of a buddy system. Somebody else that's going to hold you accountable, which is kind of what we've all done with each other throughout this time together that we've had over the last several years. And it pushes us to get better and better. It pushes us to question things that allow us all to get better. And when you have that sort of team mentality, as Ken was saying there, you're not going to get butthurt if somebody comes and says something to you that other people may take offense to. So you definitely got to have that within the team where everybody is wanting to get better. So taking that, molding it into your processes, and staying on it consistently, even when it's uncomfortable.
The drill, you got to be willing to take it from the drill sergeant.
But that's part of it.
It can get sort of hard because it's like, okay, your mindset has to change. So I got to take the meat tenderizer to your brain.
So Ted, you're talking about, is that at the boot camp kind of thing, or like afterwards, right? So you've learned it, you've tenderized your mind, you've received new wisdom, you're going back, you're keen on implementing it. Personally, like the changes you need to make in your process, right? In your mindset and stuff like that. So that we're past that stage, so to speak. Although you still need to practice, I get that. And then how do you bake this into like an company you work for? Like you can be a sales guy.
Okay, so Nate and I had a conversation about this weekend, and our conclusion is you keep your head down.
So you, as the newly minted boot camp sales guy with the process, you keep your head down?
You totally keep your head down.
Okay.
You stay below the radar. You implement it into your sales process, and you don't talk to anybody about it. You have no expectations that people are going to help you. In fact, don't ask for help. It's sort of Fight Club. You don't talk about Fight Club. We think we've made a mistake, as I was saying to Reedy earlier. I don't think you were there yet, Jeff. And we want to apologize for this mistake, but there's no way to know it without finding it out, I guess. Organizations have so many perverse incentives, different personalities, and they'll have a lot of people that are just assholes for the sake of being assholes. And so if you do something that helps you succeed, they will resent you and be jealous of you. And so they will try to trip you up. There are all kinds of, like, there's no upside in trying to inject this or help your organization inject this into the organization. And there's a tremendous amount of downside. The upside, well, there's like, if you inject, there are some things you can do with the service department that could potentially help you get comfort consults. But as far as free quote goes, which is kind of where boot camp needs to be, that's just the salesperson, right? So if the salesperson talks to anybody about it, what's the ed to them of talking to people about it?
It's kind of sad, but it's not enough. Now, to be clear, what Ted and I are talking about here is this is just the salesperson. So if you are watching this and you are doing the sales for a company as not the owner, which that's where Jeff and Reedy came from. It's really hard to push this into an organization, but there's no reason you can't use it yourself to do something like this and try and find the best path forward for every client as you go. So putting
and it's a nice sales process because you can look back and recall each of your sales visits because it's documented.
Yeah, you can definitely do that. If you're an owner, there's no reason you can't push this into the culture of the business. But as a salesperson,
there's an order. There's a reason you can do it, but there's a very specific order you need to follow or things are going to be very unpleasant.
So you guys, well, let me see if I'm understanding this right. What you guys are saying is like, so speaking about like a general sales process, right? So your company has a sales process. You as an individual have taken initiative to go somewhere else and learn a new way of doing things. It could be HVAC 2.0, maybe it's a different approach, whatever. Now, when you come back, the onus is on you to figure out like how so that you can keep doing your process without feeling like you need to take on the responsibility of like trying to figure out how to layer it into the company. And as long as you are successful, it works for you as an individual, keep using it. And then eventually, if people are interested in supporting it, they'll find you and support you. But there's no reason to actually try to then like basically a good sales process. So there a good sales process for a salesperson is agnostic to whatever like internal processes a company is. You can use this as like a personal approach without having to.
Yeah. So most HVAC companies, their sales systems are just tactics and mindset. They don't have any process. There's no process. Yeah. They're like, oh, go to Nexstar, which has ripped off a little bit of Sandler, but the rest of what Nexstar is doing is always be closing. ABC, ABC, ABC. Pretend to be interested in the homeowner, but really be interested in making that one call close. So,
Ted, I'd argue there's no mindset. It's just tactics. And so it leaves you winging it a lot.
Okay.
And so I wanted to
mindset. I think of mindset as being used car salesman mindset.
Were you going to say something, Jeff? And I saw you came off of mute.
Yeah. So just kind of hitting on that too is as we go into the economic area that we're approaching, right? Is that always be closing that ABC, that one call close. I've kind of shifted my mindset that you're going to need, considering that second or those follow-ups. So I think whoever's going to be good at the follow-up, whoever's going to be strong at that follow-up and that communication or that second visit with clients is going to be the ones that actually survive and thrive as we start to approach this.
So getting back to the most our tactics and mindset, or maybe just tactics. The difference is our system is tactics, mindset, process, and documentation.
And education.
Well, and education, and a bunch of other,
bunch of pieces. But also, Abhi, I wanted to try and bring this back around to where we started, because we've been like what we've been talking about here is it's kind of wild that sales process kind of deals with all of this, but it does. Things still need to be installed technically well, but if you aren't charging enough money and if you aren't selling the correct equipment, you can't install it well. You just can't. You put 4 tons of system on 2 tons or 3 tons of ductwork, it's going to be ugly. You sell a single stage when what that client needs is variable. It's not going to work well. So there's all of these things. But I like your value discovery process. Like part of me is like, oh man, that sounds like such a business class term. So it's taken me back to college. But it's you don't mean it as BS, and I don't take it as BS, because for years I actually hated the word value. I was like, well, it's just a stupid word that people came up with, but it is a thing. What was it? Warren Buffett, price is what you pay, value is what you get. And if you don't help people understand what's going on, you can't solve for that. But if you are consistently selling the right solutions for your clients, with the homeowners where, there's fewer forever homes, or right now in the US, we're going to be locked into homes until interest rates come back down. If you got a 3% mortgage rate, you can't afford to sell your house because you can't afford to buy the next one because the payment's going to be way more. So you're stuck. The consolidation of industry, the gold rush, that frustrates the hell out of me because so consistently the installs are so bad, and it gives all of us that give a damn technically a black eye, and that's very frustrating. But the way to solve for that is to sell the right equipment consistently in hopefully high volume. Because if we're selling 500 systems a year, who cares? There's 14 million systems a year being sold and installed between furnaces, heat pumps, and air conditioners. It doesn't matter. So if we're going to fight the ugliness that comes from the value destruction and the goodwill destruction, that all too often, so not entirely comes along with private equity. I mean, you also get it with chucking a truck on the low side. You get guys working too cheap and not knowing what they're doing. So it's everywhere. But the PE frustrates me in large part because it's such high volume. These are 20, 30, 50, $100 million companies. So they're putting a lot of stuff in wrong.
Well, the thing is, with the one truck chucks, you know what you're getting, right? Like, buddy of mine in Buffalo, New York, he saw, some, Craigslist ad or something. He doesn't know what the heck he's doing. Called the guy showed up, calls himself an HVAC installer. He's a middle school teacher. That's his full-time job. He's just moonlighting as an HVAC install comfort consultant. Like, anyone and anybody can do this, but at least with those guys, you know what you're getting, right? Like, you pay the cheap,
you pay a lot less, at least, right?
You get a deal.
You get a good deal. You assume the risk, the clear. It's none of this like other fancy stuff about, we are like 4.9 stars on this, and we have like 5-year duct cleaning plan, and like we'll give you UV lights, and like and then you cost $40,000, and it just that's the stuff, because like you instead of discovering value, like there with the one truck chuck, value discovery is crystal clear. I'll do it the cheapest way possible. No one can beat my price. You will never get hold of me ever after again. If that's what you're signing up for, great. Value discovery, done, right? Whereas with all this other stuff, these new like consolidated, like conglomerate, like clutched together companies, like,
well, also they're being bought. They're companies that used to do things well,
right?
So basically, what they're doing is they're taking all of this built-up goodwill, and they're harvesting the goodwill at the cost to the current customer that doesn't realize that they're basically overpaying for chucking the truck.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, that's the frustrating thing, is seeing installs from these big companies, and you're like, whew, man, I've seen installs that people paid $500 for that look better than this. And they paid top dollar for a bad install. So that's where sales process is definitely one of the key solutions. You got to sell the right piece of equipment.
If it's sold wrong at the sale, it doesn't get fixed at the install.
Yep. And then to address the software services and the gray tsunami, so software services you were talking about, and I don't know if Ben's still hanging on here, but Ben Reed did a great post, I don't know, 2 months ago or so now, talking about software stack. Meaning all the different tools you use. Like, we're using StreamYard right here, but I use Gmail for my email. And you could argue that Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn are part of my technology stack as well. Or what the video tool that I use. That's your technology
Slack
stack.
And
Trello
and
all these different pieces. And so we are moving to where, if we're going to fight the gray tsunami of lots of people with experience leaving more quickly than the experience is being replaced, software is definitely a piece of the puzzle. Because that is how, if you're younger, and it's funny, I largely consider myself in this, although I definitely have begun to feel the get off my lawn kind of thought process at times. And I've told people to turn it down. I'm like, oh God, I'm getting old. Turning into my grandfather because my dad never said turn it down. But if we're going to bring people in, we need to bring them up to speed. And the curse is we need to bring them up to speed on significantly more complicated equipment now. That is much more sensitive to install quality. So we've got all of these extra difficulties that go with it. So you can't just slam in a piece of equipment and have it work like you could. You could totally screw up an 80% PSC furnace and it would still run. And they'd hardly ever come off on
the
high
heat
limit.
exchanger would last 12 years instead of 30.
Yeah. But it would last, and
Yeah.
now they're like a prima donna soccer player where you touch them on the shoulder and they fall over, writhing and pretend pain. So I mean, they're getting way more sensitive. So we have all of these things we have to deal with, but we're going to need to be able to train people up repeatably, and scalably. So like back to your question on the boot camp, to some degree, boot camp needs to be online and not even in person. For the smaller outfits, it just needs to be, because the smaller outfits can't pay, $10, $20, $30, $40,000 to have in-person training come out and bring them up to speed and then hold their hands moving forward. So there's going to need to be, the good training that's basically just online.
And again, the distinction too I want to make is it's not technical training, right? It's not, how do you run a, condensate line or things like that. It's like business training and like business mindset and sales training, which is like a whole new, which is another, like, because I only bring this up I emphasize this because in the policy space, I guess a lot of times people think, oh, contractors just need to be educated. We need to give them technical training. Let's send them to college for 2 weeks. That's not what we're talking about, right? We're talking about
let's send them to med school for 2 weeks.
But they're still selling the wrong thing. I mean, I don't care how good of an installer you are. If you get the wrong piece of equipment sold, you can't make it right.
Yeah.
There's no way around it.
Well, and then you demoralize your install crews because they know.
Yes, you do.
And so now their life sucks because every day they wake up, we're going to have to go do, I don't know. I guess I should get to know some of the install guys, but Jeff knows them. And I have heard that they're like, oh God, I wish I could only install for Jeff. Because some of these other salespeople just sell such horse crap.
Yeah, so it takes your care out. It's like working for a big corporation and you just get pushed down.
Takes your soul away.
Yeah, it kills your soul.
So I don't know if you want to go into your next slide, Nate, but I can try it to see if I can tee you off for it. To do a quick summary and then tee you off. So
let's do it.
So to me, what sounds like you were saying, like this entire conversation, not just today, but like last couple of weeks, to me, it sounds like the residential HVAC landscape now is just too complicated, not complex, but complicated because of all these moving parts. And we've got all this consolidation stuff happening, like all this like value being sucked out of companies, like all these like tech brain and like like a technician driven processes being replaced by these like sales driven process of like quick sale, this and that, with home ownership changing and like all these like doodads and software and all of these things coming down the pike. It seems like the landscape is increasingly more complicated and it's like a little confusing and difficult for a lot of people to navigate. And so what I've heard you say in the past is this take back HVAC thing, take it back to roots, right? Is that fair to say?
Well, you came up with it, buddy. This one's squarely on your shoulders. But I think basically everybody here is very technically oriented. So yeah, we want to sell it. Yeah, we know we need to make money, but we want to serve the client well and put the right thing in and install it well. But sadly, that is not a huge chunk of the HVAC industry, which is very frustrating. So, and like I said, some of it's private equity with the high volume, and some of it is your chuck and a truck guys, which are probably similar volume. They're just really balkanized. There's a ton of them versus the big companies, but there's just so much mediocre work getting done that it frustrates everyone here. And I mean, I've always been this way. I've always liked to see excellence happen. I mean, the projects that we did with Energy Smart Home Performance were they were very well executed. Not going to say they were perfect, but I mean, a few dozen people in the country can do what we learned how to do, and some of those people are right here because we've taught them. But how do we actually take back HVAC? So for those of us that really give a damn technically, how do we do that? And this was me just throwing something together. I don't know if this is right. I'd love feedback. But 3 big pieces that we've been thinking about are you need to have excellence in client experience. So we've been talking about that here for well over an hour. We need to do education, not too much education, just in time, just right education. We need to make them feel valued. We need to find what they value, all those sorts of things. So the experience needs to be good for them. We also need technical excellence, because the stuff needs to be installed well. It's much more particular than it used to be. And Jay Trammell, he mentioned it's not that hard to service compared to what it was, but it is much more sensitive to install quality. Yes, you can still learn how to service all this stuff, but you're going to need to service it more if you don't install it right. And most of it's not installed right, which is going to bite the industry over time pretty hard. So technical excellence is required. And then also you need repeatability, because to fight that the gray tsunami of experienced people leaving the industry, or to some degree, some of the experienced people are kind of freaking worthless. Like I think about that Pittsburgh guy. No, I already bought it. That was not what I wanted. But how do we bring newbies in a repeatable way? And it needs to also be profitable, because if it's not, it won't scale. So profits are a natural outcome, not the primary goal. But we need to match the client experience with technical excellence and repeatability. And the goal of that is to help every client find the best solution for them. Be that whatever it is. Could be a basic system, could be a kick-ass system. So I hadn't presented this to anyone else. Does this touch anybody's heartstrings? Do you hate it? Do you like it? What do you think?
I think we got to close out this episode.
Great.
On people thinking about this.
Well, Jay, as I was talking about this, chimed in. I'm frustrated. Somebody fix it, please. I welcome competition. Bring it.
Yep.
That's where we are too,
everybody
buddy.
here feels.
Yeah. Come on, let's stop screwing this stuff up so bad. You're still going to have your cheap people that are going to take the chuck on a truck, and they're not going to pay much. And like you said, Abhi, they're going to get what they paid for. Although now they're really going to hate, because before, not being able to service it was like, oh, are you going to scare me with ghost stories? It was an empty threat. But now it's like, no, legitimately, it's going to freaking break.
Yeah.
And it's going to cost you thousands of dollars extra, and it's going to last 8 years or 10 years instead of 20, because you were cheap by $3,000. It's not worth the risk with the new equipment that's coming out, and that's standard equipment. It's EC motors. And X13s, they're really sensitive. We've got these crazy coils that are super thin and super large, and we've got to get the airflow right and the charge right and all of these things. And it's risky and dangerous and frustrating. So we can all of us here, I think, can feel this train crash coming, and it would be nice to do something productive to stop that train.
So one little nuanced point about repeatability, Nate, that I think people may have missed is that this is not like a custom job. every job, right? I mean, in every job is a custom job, but it doesn't have to be. You don't have to go back to the drawing board every single time. But like with the right process, like you can repeat the process, and this becomes business as usual. Like delivering solutions for your client becomes business as usual if that's what the path they choose, if that's what they value. And so it's not like you do your own thing, but then once in a while you'll get this like unicorn, that'll pay you $80,000 to design this perfect system. So that's not what we're talking about here, right? We're talking about having a process that lets you do this thing as business as usual. That's what the repeatability aspect of it means.
Yes. So it's clear in my mind, but thank you just in case it's not clear in someone else's. And one last comment to close on here. Cindy Zeiss said, I think one of the scariest things in the industry right now is all this money flooding in for electrification with little to no accountability for proper sizing and installation of these systems. It's bad for everyone. Yes.
Thank you, Cindy.
Yeah. If you've heard us say, we think the IRA programs have actually set us back 5 to 10 years because they're going to create so many negative experiences. And now that it's politically charged, you're going to see conservative outlets, and I mean, I lean conservative, not that I don't want to get into that, but you're going to see conservative outlets grab onto that and be like, look, this is a terrible idea. We shouldn't be doing this. We need to stick with what we've been doing. Like that's a risk. And it comes back to the same problem of take back HVAC, where we need to be doing our jobs better. But it doesn't need to be like you talked about, Abhi, of, well, we'll just send them to training. Training doesn't freaking matter if they don't sell the job and they don't do it right. Who cares? I've been to all kinds of training that I completely forgot. Ask me about my classes in school and college. Like, I don't remember 99% of that crap. I don't know, what was that Paul Simon line? It's when I think back to all the crap I learned in high school, it's a wonder I can think at all. There can be some truth to that. So I mean, we can do training, but it doesn't matter. It has to be sold right. It needs to be a good process, needs to be installed right, and it needs to be repeatable, because we can't have just unicorns doing this. I was a unicorn doing the Energy Smart projects. I was, but I could only do 10 or 20 a year. It doesn't matter. You aren't going to find more than a couple thousand of me in the country, tops. And I mean, I got to the point where I'm like, I'm not willing to work for this. Like it's too much work for what I'm getting paid, but very few people are willing to pay more. So what do you do with that? So we need something more like this. Take back HVAC.
Yeah. And with all the money flooding in, who do you think is going to end up soaking all that up? Right. And would be, in my view, personal view, like private equity and all these big companies, consolidated companies, are going to just like, what's that? I drink your milkshake, right? From There Will Be Blood. Remember?
That's 100% it. I mean, we've seen this again and again and again with downstream programs where the money goes to the kitchen table, that the bad actors tend to take the money more than anybody else. And then they make things bad.
And then we'll try to enforce some accountability with like some kind of like, like a mandatory program that blah, 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 this and that. And then we all know, we're going to do a whole episode on that, but on like what happens when you try to enforce some kind of accountability through some kind of regulation and process where people can come check a couple of boxes and give you a green seal, like, with code and stuff like that. But so all of that, so those dangers aside, like we are very cognizant of those dangers. So what we're talking about is like fundamentally taking back to transform like business models for everybody so that everyone can do this and create a pathway to success without having to have all this money flood in, and then you have to like backstop it with some kind of broken, regulatory accountability system, and like people in the middle of the kitchen table are squeezed out of that process, right? Letting them lead the process so that it's positive outcomes for everybody, and then through that is built in the accountability and built in the value, because accountability is a value, right? In that pie is being able to,
Well, it has to be there. I mean, that's good work requires accountability. It just does. So there has to be intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, internal and external. So
So we have like 5 ideas for next episodes, but we gotta shut this down, dude. It's
it's time. Yeah, we're almost 2 hours in. Holy cow, have we been running? And Tanner was almost quiet this time. So
next week for the exciting conclusion.
That's what we promised last week, but here we are.
Yeah, so I don't know what the hell we're going to talk about next week, but we'll figure it out, and we'll be here next Monday. So I hope you all are too. So
thank you all for coming.
Yep, and don't forget to the usual junk of like and subscribe, hit the bell, all that stuff. If you've enjoyed this, make sure that you find out about them. And we really do appreciate you all coming and your great comments. So
good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.